Okay, welcome to the video. SIG Guy here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to switch over your magazine release in your Classic Series SIG Sauer pistol from one side to the other. So let's get started. So let's first start off with, there are two different style mag releases now in the Classic Series SIG pistols, okay? So this is the 229 Legion that I have, and this has the original first style magazine release with the plate on the opposite side of the magazine release, okay? So basically that magazine release pushes against this plate, and we can show you here in this 226 X5 from the German Master Shop, has the exact same plate, okay? It's been like that forever in SIGs. Up until recently with the P320 and stuff, now SIG USA is kind of switching over to that style magazine release, same as the 320. And you can see instead of the plate, we have that similar style wedge where you use a paper clip to get in through that hole to release the wedge and then remove your magazine release and switch it over to the other side. So if you have this style, it works just like the classic, or excuse me, the P320s and the 365s, and I have plenty of videos on my YouTube showing you how to do that. So in this video, we're going to show you how to switch over the classic, the older classic style magazine release. As always, anytime we're working on a firearm, we want to make sure it's a clear and safe firearm. So we're going to remove any magazine. If we got a magazine installed, we're going to lock our slide to the rear. We're going to physically and visually check to make sure there's no round in the chamber, no magazine. Check our breech face, look away. Do the same thing again, chamber, magazine, breech face. We are working on a clear and safe firearm. So let's talk about the tools we're going to need to complete this task. You're going to need a punch or a pick or whatever you're going to use to depress the little detent that's locking in the magazine release. I got a 45-degree pick here, and if you get my armorer's kits for the 365 or the 320 or the deluxe kit, it comes with a 90-degree pick in there as well. Okay, so a small pick. Whatever you're going to need to get your grip panels off. Mine are the flat tip screws. So this is specific for those screws. It's actually got a rounded tip here instead of a flat tip like in a regular screwdriver, as these are concave. So you want to make sure that you have the appropriate style tip on your screwdriver so you don't damage or ruin your screws. Because this plate is actually kind of wedged in there, we're essentially going to be like chiseling it out, okay? So ideally a plastic screwdriver or a scraper or anything like that that's got a nice sharp edge on it, that's thin enough. This one's way too thick for this. I don't want to get my frame here. Basically, you just want something that is small enough to put on that little nub right there and allow you to hammer that off, okay? If you don't have something like that, you can use a flat tip with some painter's tape wrapped around it. I got about 4 or 5 layers of tape going over it this way, and then I wrapped a couple layers around it this way to keep that from falling off. So that will get the job done right there. And then obviously a small hammer to hammer that with. And always a good idea is a bluing pen. This is the Legion finish on here, so it's kind of irrelevant, but if yours is black and it's blued, you can use a bluing pen to fix up any little scratches or anything that you put into that by accident. So those are the tools we're going to use. So let's get started on disassembling the 229 to switch over the magazine release. And one more thing really quick before we get started. I want to talk about replacement parts in case you get into a little bit of trouble here. The detent for your magazine release, that is under a lot of spring tension, and if your pick slips or whatnot and that comes flying out of there, it comes out of there with such velocity, it'll literally like ricochet off a couple walls, and good luck finding it, especially if you have carpet. So there's a little detent in there, a little spring for the detent, and then the magazine release spring itself. So our replacement parts here, here's our little detent that we were talking about, and that is the part number for the detent. And here is our detent spring part number, and then the magazine release spring itself with the part number for that. So all this stuff is available on sigguy.com, and I actually just ordered today a bunch of replacement plates, okay? And I'm going to add those to the website as well. So I do have a couple of these SIG Classics, and you can see somebody here, I bought this one used, and you can see that the owner previous owner or somebody, had a pretty hard time getting that mag release plate out of there, because it looks like part of a screwdriver or something came off the nub and gouged out the plate. But you can't hide it behind the grip, as you can see. It's clearly visible. So it might be worth your while to get a brand new plate, as they're not that expensive. That way, if yours is difficult to get out, you can just tap a new one back in and it looks nice and finished when you're done. Okay, so enough with the jibber jabber. Let's get on with it. Let's lock our slide to the rear. We're going to rotate our takedown lever and remove our slide. I'm removing my slide because we're going to have this pointed in this general direction quite a bit, and this is just an extra layer of security, even though we already cleared to make sure it was safe. So I'm going to remove my slide. I'll release my hammer, and then I'm going to remove my grip panels. And these armor screwdrivers from SIG, I'm trying to get them for the website. I just actually contacted my rep again today, as I felt they were already ordered months ago, but I have not heard anything. So I wanted to make sure that we can get those for the website. So these have the proper tip here for our flathead screwdrivers. It's got another fitting there on that end. And then you can take this whole thing out, switch it around, and it's got another end there, another tool, and then another tool here. So it's a little expensive for a screwdriver, but it is pretty handy to have all these options in one little tool. So we got our grip panels off. Now pay attention to where your trigger bar spring is actually hooked on this end, as there are trigger bars with other holes and grooves in them and stuff, and it seems like a lot of people put their grip panels back on and then their trigger doesn't operate properly. It's because they got this end here hooked in the wrong place. So it's always a good idea to take your cell phone, take a bunch of pictures. I actually take video at all different angles all around it. That way I can refer to it afterwards when I'm reassembling, if I got any questions, what goes where. Okay, so I'm just going to grab this end of my trigger bar here. I'm going to unhook it from the trigger bar, and we're going to pull that out, and we're going to set that aside. Okay, so we need to remove our magazine release before we can remove our plate. So don't get on this plate with your hammer and a screwdriver and try driving it off, because there's a little pocket on the inside of the plate that the magazine spring, the magazine release spring, goes into. So our magazine release spring goes straight into that plate, and that's going to prevent that from sliding off. Okay, so to remove our spring, you can see that little detent there, right here, half of it. The other half is inside the frame, and it's got a nub facing up that actually catches the inside, just like this, catches the inside of the frame. So what we need to do is take our pick and push down on that so that this portion here can go down below our frame and then come out just like that. Okay, and you'll understand this when we pull it out, and you can kind of see what the part looks like. So what I do is I'm going to take my little punch here. I'm going to push in on the detent. You can see the detent spring loaded. Okay, so as I push in on my mag release just a little bit to remove that friction between the detent and the frame, I'm going to push in with my pick, and then that's going to hopefully start coming out. Okay, and I just heard the spring, like the detent, pop, because you can hear it clear the frame, and then you can see it right there. It's outside the frame. So we're just going to pull this straight up and out, and then there's another little spring right there. that goes right in the end of the mag release, and that's the spring that goes into the little pocket on the back side of that plate on the other side. So this is what our detent looks like. Okay, so we can pull that out of there. You can see the little itty bitty spring on the end of it. Don't be fooled by this spring, okay? Because that thing comes shooting out of there like a rocket ship if your fingers weren't capturing it or if your pick slid off, okay? So be very careful about how this all goes back together, because there is a way you can put it back incorrectly, and then you got to basically send it to a gunsmith to get them to remove this from your frame, as many people have broken their frame right here trying to force that out of there. Okay, actually I think they punch this off and then they try to drive the mag release out, and it actually breaks the frame right there, and then the frame's junk. So don't get into that situation. So there you have it. We have that all released. Now let's get the plate off of the other side. So now that we have the magazine release out, we have our trigger bar spring off, and your trigger bar spring needs to be removed because it goes through this little hole here, and this plate is going to slide off towards the rear. So we need that spring out of the way in order to do that, okay? So now we're going to take our flat tip, or preferably a plastic punch or a chisel or anything like that, and then you basically get that on. Let me zoom in again. You get that on the plate there, and I'm lifting it up so I'm not against my frame over here. And you can see how that started to move already. Oops, where are we at? Right there. So we're just using that little nub to move that off. I'm going to try my screwdriver now. And again, if you had this in a vise, I have a vise to the right of me here, but it's not very good to show on camera. So again, I'm just using the painter's tape on the flat tip, and we're going to just continue to push that off. So this is what your plate looks like. Okay, and it's kind of shaped oddly, so when we put it back together, you got to make sure it's going on the right way, okay? And I'll explain that in a second. And then you can see on the other side here, the little divot. I'm pretty sure this spring for a magazine release goes right in that divot. It kind of locks that plate from coming off. That divot's from making this nub, okay? So you can see the channel in this side here that slides into. It's kind of similar to the dovetail on your sights. It is the exact same as the other side over here. Okay, so for those guys that want to switch this over to the other side, you'd basically just drive this in the opposite way. And what I like to do is I like to set it on here first to see if the contours all line up. And as you can see right there, there's going to be a big gap here at the top. So that is incorrect. So we'd want to rotate it around this way, put that in there, and you can see that that fits properly there. So basically, I'm not going to install this on this side because I don't have to drive it out again. But it's the same thing as the other side. You basically get it started just like that, just like you would installing a sight. It's partially into that dovetail. And then we're going to use our screwdriver and our hammer and just kind of drive that in all the way till it's flush up here. But we're going to put this back on the other side as it's the same exact procedure. Okay, so we'll take the plate and we'll put it on this side here. We're going to match it up to make sure that all the contours are proper, which that is the way it goes in there. And then I'm just going to basically get it started like I would my iron sights. And get that partially in the groove, okay? And I'm just going to do it the opposite way that I removed it. Try to here without a vise. Can you see that? Yep. I'm just going to knock that back into place. And you can see the painter's tape works pretty good. Didn't really mark it up at all. If you do mark it up, you can just use your bluing pen. Put that on there and give it a second, and then wipe it off with a cloth. And if you did it, this one came out pretty easy. There's some that there's no way it's coming out of there. You're basically going to destroy it getting it out of there. That's why I would recommend having a spare plate before doing this. So there you go. That's how you install that there. So next, let's reinstall our magazine release. So let's take our magazine release and like I was talking about earlier, if you install this incorrectly, and what I mean by that is our detent, it needs to be with that little step facing in up here. We'll call it the nub. That little nub right here needs to be facing in the pistol. That way when we install this and it's installed properly and your frame is actually like right here capturing it, it still leaves this outside portion an area for you to push in with your pick. If for some reason that thing moves around like this the other way and you install that into your frame and now your frame is behind it like this, well, guess what? Now you have no way to push that detent. You have nothing to push on to release that from the frame. So you get these guys that they must pound off the plate on this side. And that doesn't even make sense to me either, because I don't know why you wouldn't be able to pull this out that side, but maybe the plate won't come off. And somehow they try forcing this out of there, and it actually breaks the frame here where that little detent comes through it, and it damages the frame. And now your frame, it can be fixed. It's expensive to fix it. You got to send it to a gunsmith. So don't be that guy that puts it in there backwards. Okay, so we're going to want to make sure that that nub is facing inside. All right, so we're going to grab this like this. I'm going to kind of angle it like this. I'm going to tilt it to the left so my spring doesn't fall off. Doesn't fall out of the mag release. I'm going to slide that right into the frame until our detent is right up against our frame. And again, we want to make sure that that nub is up against the frame. Okay, not facing outwards. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to push in with our pick and push in with our mag release at the same time. So my mag release is all the way depressed. And then I'm going to put my finger over this and let go of my mag release. I'm going to actually exercise it, work it a couple times just to make sure that it is captured, okay? Because sometimes that detent will kind of rotate around like this and it's not captured by the frame, and as soon as you let go of the mag release, it comes out and then goes shooting out of there, okay? So you can see I'm captured properly. So let's finish reinstalling everything. We're going to put our trigger bar spring back in, and this only goes in one way. We got the little hook end there. Goes in the hole there. And pay attention to the way this thing bows. It doesn't bow the other way. It bows this way. And then that hook on this end goes right into the notch on my trigger bar. And that's very important. Make sure that's hooked up right, because a lot of people seem to screw that up and then their trigger doesn't work properly afterwards. Okay, so we got our trigger bar spring all back in there. Let's put our grip panels back on. And don't need to over tighten these things either, okay? Sometimes there's an insert in the frame that's threaded, and if you jack the screws too tight, it kind of,
kind of loosens up that insert or strips it. And if you jack the screws too tight, it kind of loosens up that insert or strips it.
it kind of loosens up that insert. It kind of loosens up that insert. And if you jack the screws too tight, it kind of, loosens up that insert or strips it. Okay, so This one doesn't have it. This one has threaded holes through the frame, but sometimes there's an insert into the frame, and you can ruin that by over tightening the screws. So these don't need to be on there super tight. And then we'll reinstall our slide. And then the last thing we'll do is perform a functions check. Our very last step, anytime we disassemble and reassemble a pistol, whether it's for upgrades or even maintenance, we want to make sure that it is functioning properly by performing a function check before we return it to service, okay? So we're going to grab an empty magazine. We're going to verify that it is empty. And then once again, we're going to lock our slide to the rear. Double check to make sure we are clear and safe still. So chamber, magazine, breech face, look away, do the same thing again. Chamber, magazine, breech face. We are working on a clear and safe firearm. So we'll take our empty magazine, we'll insert it and make sure that it captures properly by our mag release. We can actually do that a couple times, make sure it's working properly. And then we're going to make sure the magazine falls out under its own weight as well, okay? Which all that's working properly as well. Because our magazine is empty, the follower is pushing up on our slide catch. So as we bring our slide to the rear, we want to make sure that that follower pushes up on our slide catch and locks our slide to the rear, which it does. We can now remove our magazine. And then we're going to pull our slide slightly to the rear, and that mag catch or release should drop, which it does, and then release our slide. Next, we'll point our muzzle in a safe direction, and we're going to pull the trigger. Hammer falls, so that's working properly. I'm going to hold my trigger to the rear, rack my slide. Now we're going to test the reset. Reset works properly. And then basically I'm going to take it out of battery. You can just do it just a little bit. Pull our trigger, and then the hammer should not fall, which it does not. So everything's working properly in this pistol. It's ready to return to service. And there you have it. It is that easy to switch over your mag release from one side to the other on your Classic Series SIG Sauer pistol. So for future reference, this is referred to as the Legacy style magazine release, okay? As always, if you like this type of video and this type of content, please subscribe. There should be a button right down here in the corner. The more subscribers you have, the more your content gets spread out on YouTube and the more people get a chance to see it. So also, if you're interested in any SIG Sauer upgrades, sigguy.com, all that stuff's available on there. This one here is pretty much bone stock. I use this one for installation videos and comparison, basically from stock to upgrade. The only thing I got on here is a base pad. These are Armory Craft pinky extensions for the 228, 229, which are very nice. So there are tons of stuff on sigguy.com, triggers, your takedown levers, hammers, sights, tuning kits, base pads, I mean, you name it, barrels. I got slides on there now, trying to make it like a one-stop shop for everybody. I got over 50 different manufacturers stuff on the website now, so, and we're still continuing to grow. So I appreciate everybody's support through the last year of helping me grow the business. I do really appreciate it. So as always, thank you for watching and have a great day.